Okay, I think we're live. So, hello and welcome to another episode of Grief Unedited. As you probably know by now, this is a place where we have real, honest, and raw conversations about the realities of grief and loss. I'm Karen. I am an accredited counsellor specialising in grief, and I've been supporting individuals for around 15 years now, making sense of their journey through loss. We're now in season two of the podcast, which is incredible. And this season, we are shifting the focus ever so slightly to bring in some of the kind of leading experts across the world of death, dying, loss, and grief. So each of my guests has got their own unique experience and are going to be talking to us about their sector or their part of the grief and bereavement industry. So, with these conversations, I do always say to listen with your own wisdom around what feels okay for you. So, if today is feeling like a particularly griefy day, then you might want to dip out of the episodes. Equally, if you feel like this is beneficial, then please do share the episodes because it's wonderful to get it out there into communities and hopefully into the ears of people who might need it most. If you do want to support the podcast, you can do it through a variety of ways. So, one of the main things that you can do to help us is to comment and share on each of the episodes because that lets the platforms know that this is valuable content and it then pushes it out to other listeners. So, that would be really helpful if you can do that. We also now have a buy as a coffee link. Sadly, there is no coffee consumed from it, but any contributions do help us with the running and the production of the podcast. Because, as you know, this is a bit of a passion project for me, but it does cost money, obviously, to run and to host. So today I am delighted to be welcoming along Berni, who has got a really interesting background. So I am excited to hear about the different facets of your work. I've done a wee bit of Googling and know a little bit about what you do, Berni. But if it's okay, can I just hand over to you and let you introduce your work to us? Tell us a bit about you and how you've come to where you are in the bereavement world, please.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in your second season. I love it when I find out that someone's been stalking me online so that they know what's going on. So I am for that since 2019-20, I have become a funeral celebrant and then am in ongoing training and practice as an end of life doula or a
Wow.
soul midwife. And it's quite interesting because people perhaps especially in Scotland will know what a celebrant is because
Mm.
you have celebrants are legal on the wedding side, which they're not in Wales and England. So but
Ah,
they will,
didn't know that.
yeah, we still cannot legally marry people in England and
Ah,
Wales. So it's really interesting.
well, there you go.
So yeah, so the awareness is more probably in Scotland, but so as a celebrant I support families when they have lost somebody. But as an end of life doula, I'm effectively a companion in death. So I'm a non medical person who sits alongside a person and or their family and supports them through the last stages of their life. And that can
Mm.
be a matter of weeks. It could end up being years. It can
Wow,
be
okay.
very specific um, jobs. It can be very fluid. But basically, I'm there to kind of be that person in between the professionals, the carers, the district nurses, and all of the people who are rushing around doing medical things and support and her time limited, and the person and their family. So help facilitate conversations, ensure that they are remembered as their full authentic selves,
Oh,
how they
beautiful.
their whole life so that they, because people come along, they're very busy, they've got their 20-minute slot to do something, they see an elderly person, perhaps someone who isn't communicating, someone who's very frail, but that person has a whole life
Yeah.
that has led them there. And my job really is to remember that and hold that and support that as a whole. So it's very varied. It's very lovely. What that does tend to mean is that quite unlike a lot of celebrants, I get to meet some of my clients before they're that we're dealing with the death. So I actually
Okay.
might help more people on the journey and then help them and their family with the funeral afterwards. So I get to know a bit more of their story, perhaps. And I think by having both of those, that what prompted me to create my other business, which is My Life, My Death, My Wishes, which is a bit like you, it's a bit of a passion project. It is about trying to um, demystify and move all the shrouds and the cloak and dagger off the
Mm,
funeral industry, and support people by empowering them to know what choices are out there, to make decisions and have conversations before they get to the point where they can't, and to really be less fearful of death and dying, and rather than seeing it as something separate from life, see it more as a part of life. You can't have one without the other, sadly.
100%. Yeah. We're definitely singing from the same hymn sheet in that one, and I think I wish I have that more people kind of saw it in that way. Do you know that the two are
Yeah.
connected? I think people still do that thing of like death being something that's over there and we don't want to go near, and it's like it's part of
Won't
the
talk
life
about it.
process.
It's like they think it's going to happen. If they talk about it, they think it's going to happen. If that was the case, we'd all be talking about money and sex, wouldn't we? It doesn't bring it on, but what it does do is it um takes the mystery and the fear off. It takes its power, it takes the wind out of its sails.
Yeah.
It's like when you think about going to the dentist or having an operation, the thought of it and the run up to it and the anxiety, the anticipatory grief, anxiety, stress is generally much worse than the reality of it. Um, I'm not saying that death and dying is joy and pleasant and
No.
necessarily, but what I'm saying is if you've had conversations and you have um, looked at the impact and your what your needs and what your fears are, and you've spoken of them, then people are all working together to help minimize that. Whereas if people don't know what you're afraid of and what bits you're worried about, then you know how can they help you, and how
Yeah.
can you be, it's not just the death bit, it's people, the dying, being dead is not the problem so often, it's the dying that people are frightened
Yeah.
of, and then the lack of control they might have over that, and the lack of understanding. I mean, I know personally my biggest fear is being locked inside my head and not being able to communicate it, and having
Hmm.
people around me talking about me, and making decisions on my behalf without, and me screaming in my head that that's not what I want, and them not
Yeah.
knowing that. So to alleviate that, I can make sure everyone blooming well knows what I like, don't like, what I want to eat, what I like round me, who I want
Yeah.
sat there, and make sure everyone knows beforehand, and then I won't find myself in that position, hopefully.
Yeah. I always remember somebody saying to me that the body knows how to die.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's just given space to actually listen to the wisdom of it, you know, and actually trusting that the body knows
Yeah,
what it's doing. Like we
yeah,
might be scared and we might not know, and it feels like this
yeah,
great unknown that we're kind of stepping
yeah.
into. But just that trust of like just in the same way that we are birthed into the world and the body knew how to
That's
do
right.
that, it's like the body knows how to do this. We just need to sometimes get out of the way of it.
Yeah, and if any of anyone listening has had children, you know how scary the idea of having your first child is, because you have no idea, and you're asked all sorts of questions about. I mean, we do it, don't we? We ask questions. What do you want? How do you want? What do you want surround? How do you want this to happen? This, that, and the other. And we plan and we think about it, and we have a rough idea. What are our fears? We talk about. And we have our classes where we talk about what we're frightened of, and we do all of those things. And at the end of the day, our body will do what it needs to do
Yep.
to birth, and immediately afterwards you feel absolutely, you know elated or joyful about having this baby, and all of that thing that you're never going to do it ever again is gone. And I think with dying, our body does that. The problem is that we've been separated from it, it's been disconnected from
Yep.
um, community in the last 100 years, since we got the NHS and central heating and all of those things. And we've kind of lost touch with it being part of our lives, and
Mm.
knowing what it looks like and knowing what it feels like. And probably worse, we've replaced it with Hollywood.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And and people, and how people die in films, and how people grieve in films, which makes people feel very, I hate to use the word inadequate, but yeah, inadequate,
Mm.
because they think that they should be doing things in a certain way. And the thing about dying and loss and grief is there's no should in it. There is no rule book. There's no straight path. There's no time frame. There's no way it should look, but we are led to believe it.
Mm.
Um, Even if it's in subconsciously put into us, because we've seen it so often. It's like, as a celebrant and as a doula, I come across this quite often. One of the realizations I had was that people think that they need to go to the crematorium because they need to be there when their person goes, and that a direct cremation or saying goodbye somewhere else isn't the same.
Mm.
But that's because I think that they envisage and they have this image of the Hollywood thing that happens with a cremation. So the curtains close and these big doors open, and there's this
Mhm.
fiery pit in which, and then this kind of conveyor belt takes a coffin into the fire, and that is when the person is cremated, and
Yeah.
you are there while that's happening. And
Yeah.
that's not the case, so you don't actually physically, it's not physically happening like that. There is no big open fire. There's no, it's
Yeah.
just this image we have because it's nice and dramatic for Hollywood.
Yeah. It's funny is probably the wrong word, but it's interesting that you bring that example up because that's exactly what I experienced as a child. My dad had passed when I was
Mhm.
11 and he was cremated, and I remember very, very vividly feeling almost this sense of fear as the curtains started to close because I knew I don't know if anybody had actually explained to me what a cremation was or whether
Yeah,
I'd just seen it in the TV or what. I don't remember anybody actually sitting me down and saying this is what will happen, but I felt like I understood it. I felt like I knew what was going to happen, but that
yeah,
was exactly the fear that I had of like these curtains closing, was that his you know coffin, I
the-
couldn't find that word there, was just going to
yeah,
get, disappeared into this
yeah.
big fire. And it's quite frightening when you think of it through that
It
lens.
is. I mean, this whole thing. Stepping back to what I was saying before, that we have lost connection with the process of dying, which is bad enough for us as adults, but it's perhaps even worse for children because they have
Mm,
no experience and then of what it means, and they are not included from a place of kindness. Usually it's kind of
mm,
from a place of kindness. We won't let the children come to the funeral because it will make them sad. We won't, we'll all pretend that we're fine and happy because we don't want them to see us upset. And it creates a lot of misunderstanding. Children are surprisingly strong and resilient, and as much as we hate seeing our children sad, if they don't have the opportunity to see us sad and the opportunity to cry and the opportunity to be angry or or witness the loss of somebody they loved as well, then they won't process it. I mean, that is the whole point of funeral and whatever however big or an elaborate or small and personal you make it, it is a ritual, a process and a ritual which helps your brain connect to the fact that someone is God. And if you
yeah.
exclude someone from that, then it becomes very confusing. And I had it with all my grandparents. They all died. I didn't go to any of their funerals. No one ever showed that they were upset or talked about it. And it was
Wow.
it, it was really confusing about whether I should be sad or not. Didn't really process that they weren't around anymore. It was kind of like didn't kind of connect. And I think that is the worst thing. And I spend a lot of time as a funeral celebrant, particularly encouraging families when they are organizing a funeral to find a way to engage and involve children if that's necessary. So if I know that there's children coming, be it because they're a grandparent or worse, a parent who they've lost, I will try and find something symbolic or some way that they can be involved if their parents are happy with that. And if it's
Mm.
a crematorium, I offer to take them in first and show them what it's going to be like and explain what to expect and show them where everyone will be sitting and where their person is going to be placed. And and sometimes I'll say to them, would you do me a favor? Look, and I could do with some help. Would you help me and to lead be in charge of leading your person in, whoever that
Mm.
is, or help me with this because I have a lot of things I have to do today. And it's just trying to give them a role within and some
Oh.
control within a situation that is very much out of their control, which I guess is my job with all the adults that I work with
Mm.
anyway. It's giving people back their autonomy and their power and their sense of self
Mm.
and as a storyteller, which is effectively what I am, is making sure that they are seen and heard and expressed in a way that is authentically them.
I'm very aware that I would usually be asking you some questions, and I feel like you've probably answered the questions a little bit already, but just to kind of clarify for anyone that's listening in terms of our kind of usual structure, what would you say has been one of your kind of unexpected lessons? Is that the piece that you were talking about of like, I suppose just the lack of structure that there is to grief? Is that what you would,
I think,
has that
I
been your
think there
unexpected
was,
lesson?
yeah. I mean, when I was training and when I was trained and started having done a lot of funerals, I think I was still surprised by the fact that there is no rule book to grief, but that it isn't always tears and drama,
No, no.
and or even visible, recognizable. Quite often it's, I mean, it can be, some people do feel sad and desperate and overwhelmed and inconsolable and cry, but some people feel very detached from it or confused or angry or even relieved when something like this happens. And not
Mm.
everyone cries, there isn't. And sometimes you might feel fine for ages and then not, which I was kind of aware of that, but there's no order. And the other thing I became very aware of, which I learned very quickly, is that we always talk about loved one,
Mm.
and it's not always love. Sometimes it's guilt, sometimes it's regret, sometimes it's disappointment, sometimes there's a lot of unfinished business. So I try not to assume that phrase. Which is, you've heard me say it, I always talk about your person.
Person, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can can gauge then, and then you can talk about them in using a word or a description that is relevant to them, that
Yeah.
connects them back. So I think there's a lot of assumptions with grief, that it's, you loved someone, you're feeling sad that they're not there, and you're going to cry and you're going to be not very good at something. And because of that assumption, again, I blame Hollywood partly for that, you end up with this kind of really lot of misunderstanding and conflict within a family,
Mm.
where one person is busy sorting everything out and getting very organized and being very practical, and the other one is sobbing in a corner and not able to process or think straight or do anything, and blaming the other one for not caring. And I think that kind of just trying to help everybody as that intermediary, I can't even say the word, intermediary person, is
Mm.
to help them understand that everyone is processing it in their own way and at a different frame. And that can be quite useful because, well, one of you is not coping and the other one is. Maybe in 6 months' time, that person who's been so fabulous is going to need your help because they've suddenly been hit by that in whatever way that is in the future.
Mm.
Yeah. So
I
it's
often use and you're probably familiar with it, but I often use the dual process model of grief when I'm working with
mm,
clients. And that's very much that idea of, sometimes we're really in that loss orientated stressor space where, the grief just feels really palpable and really heavy. But then we've
yeah,
also got that restorative space that actually
mm,
sometimes we're forced into it because we've got stuff to
yeah,
do and life still has to
yeah,
keep happening. And other times it's more of a natural kind of progression. But I love
yeah,
that ability to help people understand that it's not that I'm not coping and you are. It's just that, I'm in a griefy day and you're in a restorative day, and,
Yeah,
tomorrow might be different and we might switch those roles around. So I
that's
do love
right.
that kind of dynamic of it never stays
Well,
the same.
thank goodness for it, because if we all fell apart at the same moment, nothing would
Yeah,
get done, would it? I
yeah,
mean, that's, you have to. And that whole, the other thing I'm very aware of is how abstract it becomes. You know you're in it, you know you're grieving, you know that you're sad, but at the same time, it feels like you're looking at it from over here somewhere, and it's happening to someone else. So you kind of
yeah,
feel detached from it. And that's our, as you know, as a counselor, that is our bodies giving us what we can cope with, and only only helping us process, so we're just not processing everything all at once because it's too much, perhaps.
yeah.
Mm.
Tell me a bit about some of the misconceptions of your role, Bernie, because certainly where I am, and I've been working as a grief practitioner for, as I say, 16 years, I think now, I do not personally know a single family that have actually had a doula as part of their journey. And yet, I have such huge respect for that role because I can see how
Mm.
absolutely valuable that will be for families. So, why
Yeah.
are people not doing it more often, I suppose, is what I'm asking you. Like, why?
Yeah, I think it's quite a new concept in the UK. I mean, even the role of the birth doula, because they've
Mm,
some people have heard of a birth doula now, and perhaps not many people have had one. But basically, it's someone who sits in that middle space. But people assume. I think the biggest misconception is that my role is about death,
mm,
and it's going to be somber and depressing, and it's not. It's about life and empowerment and choice and acceptance, and really helping people articulate and live their fullness and and share their truth and
yeah.
express themselves. So it's quite a liberating, um, and very rewarding and powerful position if you have time to spend with somebody who knows that they are on that path, helping facilitate them articulating what they want, or helping them cross things off their bucket list, finding
Beautiful.
ways for them to leave legacy that isn't just things and money and property, but
Stuff.
is, it's the emotive stuff. The
Mm,
biggest legacy you can leave is how you made someone feel. They grow up, we ripple into each other's lives, and we change them forever, even if it's just a tiny little pebble in there. Every
mm,
person that I've met through life and through their deaths have had some impact. I've got some lesson or some behavior or some type of sweet that I've never heard of, or a book I've not thought of before, or a film I've gone to watch, or a flower that I didn't know. Then, that's just something.
yeah.
People's lives, just go further than you can ever imagine. So, it's, yeah, it's creative and relational, and often really surprisingly uplifting,
Mm,
because I
hmm
provide solutions and relief and comfort,
hmm
and that's a lovely thing. I get families talking to one another rather than pretending. I mean, the
Yeah.
biggest joy when I wrote my book, My Life, My Death, My Wishes, the best thing, and it would have been enough if it was all I got out of it. I got my family talking about their past, at my parents
Oh,
talking about what they want, what they don't want. I started, learning things I didn't even realize I didn't know about their story, and things like that. And it facilitated conversations within my own family, and
beautiful.
that
Yeah.
in itself is lovely. And as a doula, and I realized when I was helping one person that they we were trying to create an audio, like, you can hit the Swan Song project where you can write songs about your story, but there was also a project happening that was, um, helping people understand the process of dying, and I was getting this guy involved in this, and he was being interviewed for the project, so he would live on and help other people. um I can't remember what I was saying now. um it made me realize that I didn't remember things about my dad and his fears and all of those things, so I wouldn't remember. And now when I'm sat with him now, if he starts going into a reminiscence, I hit record on my phone and get a little bit of audio.
Oh, nice. Hmm.
Yeah, so I've got all these little bits of audio of him talking about like random things and with a real passion. It's really
Hmm.
lovely.
And I think that's some of the difficulty I think in grief is that we don't know what we don't know sometimes, you know, about somebody's life,
Yeah,
and it's only once they're gone that we suddenly often have those moments where we're like, oh, actually, I don't know, or I can't remember
no,
that. And I just when you're talking about that idea of like the kind of legacy people leave. I always remember when I worked at Child Bereavement UK, we quite often used that book, Badger's Parting Gifts. And I
right.
just love the idea of that because it is about Badger and all of the different gifts that he leaves to his friends
Yeah,
and, you know, the things that he teaches them and the ways that he's shown up in their lives. And I
yeah,
think now, as a practitioner, it's still something that I'll bring into the room when I'm working with people, that idea of, you know, what are the things you remember of them? What are the gifts that they gave you as part of their, you know, their legacy? So
yeah.
I think it's such a
Yeah, I mean,
beautiful way
having
to
someone's
remember.
car or watch is lovely,
Hmm.
but having a trait that connects you back to them,
Yeah.
or um, a feeling, or an emotion that connects you, it's just so much more. I mean, when you look at yourself and you think, oh, I am that way because of that person, and I
Hmm.
love being that way, and I love them for being that way. I mean, that's a wonderful thing, much more valuable than the stuff.
I don't know, I've not seen it here in the UK yet, but I've loved this trend that seems to be happening mainly in America at the moment of like having a QR code on somebody's headstone so that you can
Uh,
either have, like I've seen people upload like their favourite recipes and things like that, so you can go and
yeah,
bake their cookies or whatever. But also I've seen ones where it's been like a video to, you know, almost like a show reel of the person's life, so you can almost get that sense of who they were as a person. You can learn some cool things about them, do you know? And it's like that's what to me memorial should be about, is like actually really
absolutely.
remembering them as a person and not just the
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
they were
y-
born on this date, died on that date, and here's this, you know, that dash bit in
yeah,
between.
but you go wandering around graveyards and reading stones and just seeing the two dates. Always the Linda Ellis's poem, The Dash. It's
Yeah,
like we want to know what that dash is all
all that
about.
stuff in the
And
middle.
all of this modern stuff that we have means we can do that, and other people can as well. I was at an interesting conference the other day about decolonizing and death study and mapping deathways, and
Ah,
talking
okay.
about how when what no, it used to be when you had died, if you think back, when someone died, that's it, there wasn't anything. And then we
Mm,
developed paintings of people, so a painting, an image of them lived on. And then we got photography, and so we had people living on in photographs, and then we had video and film, so people live on beyond their life in video and film and this that, and the other. And now we've got AI and QR codes and
yeah,
and and all of these amazing things, and where you can have, I mean, there won't be long before you can have an avatar of somebody who isn't around anymore and interact with them like they're still around. So when do we die? When is that, you know
yeah.
that
It's already a thing in China mainly, but yeah, there's definitely, and I think initially, like when you talk about that here in the communities I'm part of, you
Yeah,
know, people are
yeah,
horrified by the idea of it.
yeah,
But actually in China, it seems to be much more well received. You know, it seems to be quite, it's not a normal thing as such yet,
yeah,
but there's definitely a whole population of people who have essentially trained AI using photos, videos, you know,
yeah,
voice notes of their loved one to actually kind of emulate a
yeah.
version of their loved one. And I think there was an interesting wee bit of research about this because they were asking the question of like, does this help or does it hinder grief?
I was just
And
going to say,
it was quite
does it mean you
interesting.
delay processing your loss?
Well,
If
that's
you're
the
still
thing. I think
interacting, yeah,
people had assumed that that would be the case, that, you know, it
yeah,
was going to be an unhelpful thing and that
yeah,
it was creating these kind of false relationships and stuff. But actually, what they found is that for people where there was any sense of like unfinished business or any guilt around at the kind of cause of death or circumstance of death, it actually was quite a helpful tool because it allowed them to do that kind of repairing work that
yeah,
they obviously couldn't do. They couldn't speak to their loved one in that way anymore. So it gave them a mechanism or a tool to
yeah,
have those conversations. So I definitely think it's going to be really influential in how we navigate this kind of next decade or so
yeah.
of grief as well.
Yeah, very interesting to see how
Mm,
it is when you can have the argument you didn't have and deal with the disappointments and the frustrations with an avatar
yeah.
of the person that you had, and that and the impetus to do that, but also as much time as you need to do that, I guess.
Yeah. But like then when do you turn it off? Do you know, like
Yeah,
when is enough?
yeah. I
That's
mean,
the other part.
that might be the thing, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
there is that. I mean, but then the mental health of society is a thing in its own,
Mm,
and if that's still, we're still going to need counselling and support and all of those things, because there is that point when things become unhealthy.
unhealthy, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's something to complicate our futures, isn't it?
My last ask of you, Bernie, if you can share
Mm.
with us, tell us a bit about like an experience or a moment or something that's kind of come along in your journey that's really just affirmed your commitment to this work. Like, have you had one of those moments where you're just like, "Ah, I'm in the right place. This is me."
Yeah, I think I have them quite often, but
Oh,
there's a couple that really spring to. Yeah, one that really had it, like, I was very emotional about it because I'd facilitated a funeral for a family where the mum had died by suicide, and there was two teenagers and dad, and we'd created something amazing, and I'd spent a lot of time just talking, just naturally giving my time and spending time and building a relationship with the teenagers and finding ways that we could do things. And then after the whole funeral and everything had happened, a couple of days later, they turned up at my door with flowers and chocolates to thank me. And I'm thinking, like, what is, this is, I mean, how very thoughtful, but in the depths of despair and
yeah.
grief, these people wanted to say thank you. And
Thank
it
you.
just like, and I thought, it's, yeah, it was amazing. And the other, the other thing that makes me feel so grateful to have found this path is one particular doula client I've had, and I've been with her for a really long time now. It was supposed to be like a few weeks. She was, she had her the last rites read, and the coffin was bought, and everything was there, and I was there just really to support the family. And she keeps bouncing back and bouncing back. 3.5 years later, I'm
Wow.
still I'm still going around, and we have a little laugh, and I read and this that, and the other. And I feel like I describe her and I describe our relationship and as food for my soul. She feeds my soul,
Mm,
and my time with her is really profound. And she can't communicate with her voice, and she does it with a grimace or a smile or whatever. But she's a great listener, and I think having found this role, I really appreciate how, as community and people, and the reciprocity of
yeah.
life, um and it's never one-sided, and if you start acting like it is one-sided and you are the solution, you lose uh the empathy, because
Mm,
I'm not the solution. I'm that I am there to work with, not
right.
for or do on behalf of. It's a very much a partnership.
Mm,
And yeah, I'm so passionate about it, and I just really can't imagine doing anything else. And it's not, I don't know, it's really funny because I earn much less now than I've ever earned in my life, and I've never been happier. And it's
yes.
properly a calling,
Yeah.
and I'm really passionate about it, and I
Yeah.
can't imagine ever not doing it.
It's so interesting as well because I'm conscious like the passion shines out of you, and I'm noticing even between us today like how much smiling we're doing and how kind of
Yeah,
joyful it feels, to talk
yeah,
about this. And I'm like, God, it really does dispel that idea of grief being really morbid and heavy. And it's
yeah,
like, yeah, there are really tender and beautiful moments in this work, I
yeah,
think, and I
yeah,
totally agree. It's an absolute pleasure, and there's a real preciousness to what we can bring to clients. So
We're
yeah,
so privileged, aren't we? And
yeah,
it's such if you are providing relief to someone and they are benefiting, you are benefiting from knowing that you are helping someone. If you are that type of person,
yeah,
my whole, uh, but happiness and well-being comes from caring and sharing. And if you can do that as a career as well as just as the type of person you are in your personal life, then wow, aren't we lucky?
aren't we lucky? What a beautiful
Mm,
note to end on. That's, yeah,
yeah,
aren't we lucky? Thank you, Bernie,
yeah,
for being not just a fantastic guest, but but also sharing that behind the scenes look as well. Because I
yeah.
think, as I say, certainly for me, the doula movement is something that I hope we get more traction with here, because I really see the value and the need for it, as being that kind of conduit to
Mm,
keep families supported and to, as you say, absolutely advocate for that dying person and to help them tell the stories of their life. So I hope that more families are able to have access to that and bring it into part
yeah.
of that dying process, because I think it's such a powerful, yeah, powerful tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, it should be something that's available as part of the NHS that people can just
Yeah.
tap into. And it takes a lot of pressure off everyone else. If you can have a
Mm,
doula, then yeah, it's wonderful. I really, yeah, say go and find it, go and find
mm.
one in your area.
If people do want to connect with you, where do they find you? Where are you? What's your online
Yeah.
homes?
I'm on pretty much on most of social media as Bernie B, BERNIB, full life. And that's also, but if you put in BERNIB, you'll find my website, you'll find all of that. And then the book, My Life, My Death, My Wishes. If you put that in, you'll find a special website for it as well. But yeah, Bernie
Amazing.
B will get you
Bernie B.
find you everywhere, everything you need.
We'll also make sure we always try and make sure that we link to our show notes as well. So if you're listening along today and you want to get in touch with Bernie, if you want to check out our website, just check in the show notes and we'll make sure we get a link to both your website and the book as well. Because again, such a valuable resource that if you've not checked it out, what a brilliant way to have those really sometimes difficult conversations about,
Mm,
what we want for our ending. As I said right at the top of the show, if this episode has been useful to you, if you think there's somebody in your world that would benefit from it, please do consider leaving us a review or sharing it directly with them, because that helps to push it out into the various different platform communities. And lastly, as I always say, if you haven't done so yet, please make sure that you hit subscribe on today's episode as well, so that you get updates on any subsequent episodes as well. And all that remains for me to say is a huge thank you to you, Bernie, for bringing yourself here today and sharing what you've shared with us. And it's been my absolute pleasure to have you here.
Feelings mutual. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. You take good care.